I thought she was the one. I believed every word until the lies started unraveling like a frayed rope and I was left holding the broken end. The coffee was always too sweet. That's the detail that stuck with me later. How Diane took 2 sugars in hers, even though she'd complained about her doctor warning her off sweets. Life's too short for bitter coffee, she'd say, grinning as she stirred. I should have noticed how easily she shrugged off contradictions. We met at the library, of all places. Me, browsing the history section like I did every Saturday morning since retirement left me with too many empty hours. Her, perched in the armchair by the window, sunlight catching the silver streaks in her dark hair. She wasn't reading, just turning pages slowly, watching me over the top of her glasses. "You look like a man who knows his Civil War battles," she'd said when she finally approached. Close up, I caught the faintest scent of lavender and something warmer underneath. Vanilla, maybe. "Only the ones Grant lost," I joked, surprised at how easily the words came. Her laugh was sudden, unguarded. "Now there's a man who knows how to make history interesting." For 2 years, it felt real in ways my first marriage never had. Diane remembered my daughter's birthday when even I'd almost forgotten, showing up with a carefully wrapped book about women pilots in World War II. Maggie's passion. She fixed the leaky kitchen faucet I'd ignored for months, rolling up the sleeves of my old flannel shirt she'd stolen, humming while she worked. But it was the nights I loved most. How she'd curl against me on the couch, her feet icy under the blanket we kept just for her, watching old movies until we both dozed off. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. "Late meeting?" I asked when she came in at 8:30, cheeks flushed from the autumn chill. "Traffic was hell," she said, hanging up her coat. But her keys landed in the bowl with a clatter, the same sharp sound they made when she was nervous. I let it go. Then came the Thursday. Her phone buzzed during dinner. She flipped it over so fast her wine sloshed. "Work?" "Just spam." But her thumb moved too quickly, swiping it away. By December, I'd started noticing the math didn't add up. The client dinners that never appeared on her expense reports. The weekend she spent helping her sister move. The same sister whose Facebook showed her vacationing in Cancun. One frozen January morning, I found the receipt in her coat pocket, a hotel bar charge, 11:17 p.m., the night she'd claimed she was working late. I stood at the kitchen window watching my breath fog the glass, the paper trembling in my hand. Outside, the neighbor's Christmas lights still blinked red and green, though it was mid-January. Cheap ones, the kind that keep going after the holiday because no one can be bothered to take them down. That's when I knew. The truth had been there all along, blinking at me in plain sight. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I didn't just lose her. I lost the version of myself that believed in her. I waited until evening to confront her. Sat at the kitchen table with that damning receipt laid out like evidence in a trial, my fingers tracing the embossed hotel logo over and over. The furnace kicked on with a groan, pushing warm air that suddenly felt suffocating. Diane walked in humming, her cheeks pink from the cold. She stopped mid-step when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" Her voice was all concern, the same tone she'd used when I'd thrown out my back last spring. I pushed the receipt across the table, watched her expression shift from confusion to recognition to something like resignation. "This from your late meeting?" My voice surprised me, calm, almost detached. She didn't cry immediately. First came the excuses. "It wasn't what you think." "Then tell me what it was." The clock above the stove ticked loudly in the silence. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. When her tears finally came, they were angry ones. "You've been so distant lately, always buried in your books, your projects." I almost laughed. After 20 years of marriage to my first wife, I knew deflection when I heard it, but the pain was physical, a hot pressure behind my ribs like my heart might actually break. That night I slept on the couch. The next morning I found her packing. "Mark and I—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. I watched her fold sweaters with military precision, the same way she'd once organized my closet. Noticed how she left behind the flannel shirt she'd always loved, the one that still smelled like her perfume in the sleeves. The door clicked shut at 11:23 a.m. I remember because I stared at the clock for a full hour after, waiting to feel something besides numb. The days blurred. I drank too much bourbon, stopped shaving, found myself standing in the grocery aisle staring at her favorite tea, the box gathering dust in my hand until some poor stock boy asked if I needed help. Worst were the nights. I'd wake at 3 a.m. certain I heard her laugh, only to find the house silent except for the refrigerator humming. Started leaving the TV on for company. Old westerns I'd seen a dozen times, the gunfire, and saloon doors a welcome distraction from my thoughts. My daughter Maggie called every Sunday. "You eatin' okay, Dad?" I lied and said yes. One morning I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, a stranger with bloodshot eyes and salt and pepper stubble. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just mourning Diane. I was mourning the future I'd imagined, the retirement trips we'd planned, the grandkids we might have spoiled together. I threw out the bourbon that afternoon, dug her forgotten hairpins from the couch cushions, canceled the joint credit card with hands that barely shook. Small victories, but they were mine. I had to rebuild myself from the ground up, not for revenge, not for her, but because I owed it to the man I used to be. The first real turning point came on a Tuesday morning when I found myself standing in the shower, water long gone cold, staring at the shampoo bottle Diane had left behind, coconut scented. I unscrewed the cap, inhaled, and then did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I threw it against the tile wall with a shout that startled even me. The plastic cracked, sending viscous white liquid dripping like tears down the shower wall. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store, bought paint. Not the eggshell white Diane had picked for the living room, but a warm taupe that reminded me of the desert canyons I'd loved as a boy. I painted until my arms ached, the rhythmic swish of the roller drowning out the thoughts I wasn't ready to face. Maggie started coming by on Wednesdays. She'd bring takeout and pretend not to notice when I pushed food around my plate. "Dad," she said one evening, chopsticks hovering over her kung pao chicken, "remember when Mom left and you taught me to change a tire?" I nodded. That summer after the divorce, I'd been determined my 16-year-old daughter wouldn't grow up helpless. "I think it's time you taught yourself something new." The next morning, I dug out my old camera, a Nikon F3 I hadn't used since the 90s. The leather case still smelled like darkroom chemicals. I drove to the state park, walked trails until my knees protested, and photographed nothing in particular. Spiderwebs jeweled with dew, the gnarled roots of an oak tree, sunlight fracturing through bare branches. When I got the first roll developed, the clerk smiled. "These are good." I joined a photography club at the community center. Mostly retirees like me, swapping stories about Kodachrome and complaining about digital. Linda, a widow with sharp blue eyes, showed me how to use Lightroom. "You've got an eye for composition," she said, and something in my chest unclenched just a little. One night, sorting through old boxes, I found the letters Diane had written me early on, pages filled with looping script and promises that now curdled in my throat. I built a fire in the backyard pit, fed them to the flames one by one, watched the embers rise like reverse snowfall until all that remained was ash and the bitter knowledge that the woman I'd loved might never have existed at all. Spring came. I planted tomatoes where Diane had wanted roses, started sleeping through the night. When Maggie asked if I was dating, I didn't bristle. "Not yet," I said, "but I'm not closed for business." The morning I woke without reaching for the empty space beside me first, I knew I'd turned some invisible corner. I made coffee, black now, and drank it on the porch, watching a cardinal build its nest in the maple tree. The world kept turning. So could I. I wasn't looking for it. Hell, I didn't even trust it. But then, her. The rain started just as I was packing up my camera gear at the lakeside, big, fat drops that sent the Saturday morning joggers scrambling for cover. I was fumbling with my lens cap when a voice cut through the downpour. "That's a serious camera for a very wet morning." She stood under a bright yellow umbrella, holding a second one out toward me. Mid-60s maybe, with silver hair escaping a messy bun, and the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. A canvas tote bag hung from her shoulder, stuffed with library books. Thanks, I said, accepting the umbrella. I was trying to catch the sunrise over the water. Ah, a morning person, she chuckled. I'm only up this early because my cat decided 5 a.m. was breakfast time. We walked together toward the parking lot, our shoes splashing through growing puddles. Her name was Ellen, retired school librarian, lived 2 streets over from me, as it turned out. You're the one who repainted his house taupe, she said as we reached my car. I walk my dog past there. It's a good color. I didn't see her again for 3 weeks. Then, on a Thursday, there she was at the farmer's market, examining tomatoes with the same intensity most people reserve for diamond rings. You like gardening? I asked, coming up beside her. She held up a beefsteak tomato, its skin still damp with morning dew. Love it, though last year the squirrels got every single one of these before I did. We talked for 20 minutes about raised beds and squirrel deterrence. When she mentioned needing help installing a new compost bin, I surprised myself by offering to assist. That's very neighborly of you, she said, handing me a business card with her number scribbled on the back. Saturday morning? That Saturday turned into lunch after we finished the compost project, then a walk through the botanical gardens the following week. Easy conversations about books and travel, and why people our age still bother watching the news. The first time she invited me to her house for dinner, I nearly canceled 3 times. My hands shook as I rang the doorbell. The scent of garlic and rosemary wafted through the screen door. You made it, she said, wiping her hands on a checkered apron. Behind her, a tabby cat watched me with suspicious yellow eyes. Over pot roast and too much red wine, we talked about our exes. Not in the bitter way I'd grown accustomed to, but with a kind of weary acceptance. My husband left after 32 years, she said, refilling my glass. For his 28-year-old dental hygienist. I should have seen it coming. Suddenly he was very concerned about his flossing technique. I laughed so hard I snorted wine, which made her laugh harder. And in that moment, surrounded by the warm light of her kitchen, the years of loneliness and doubt felt lighter somehow. On my way out, she hugged me, a quick, firm embrace that left the scent of lavender on my shirt. Next time, she said, I'll show you my darkroom. If you're interested. I drove home with the windows down, the night air cool on my face. For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow. When she heard I was happy, she couldn't believe it. Not because she cared, but because she never thought I'd move on. The text came through on a Sunday afternoon while Ellen and I were sorting through boxes of old photographs in her attic. My phone buzzed against the hardwood floor, the screen lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Diane. Heard you're seeing someone. Happy for you. The words sat there, innocuous, yet loaded. I turned the phone face down, but not before Ellen caught the tension in my shoulders. Everything okay? She held up a faded Polaroid of her younger self standing beside a VW bus. Just my ex, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Ellen set the photo aside and wiped her dusty hands on her jeans. Ah, the one who left the coconut shampoo on your conscience. I snorted. Leave it to Ellen to remember the exact detail I'd shared months ago. She says she's happy for me. And that bothers you? I picked at a loose thread on my shirt cuff. Because it shouldn't mean anything, but it does. Ellen reached over and squeezed my hand, her fingers warm and steady. Of course it does. She was your life once. Later that night, alone in my kitchen, I stared at Diane's message. The last time we'd spoken was the day she moved out, when she'd told me with tear-filled eyes that some people just aren't meant to be happy. I didn't reply, but the universe has a cruel sense of timing. 3 days later, I ran into Diane at the grocery store. She stood by the organic produce, her hair shorter now, her shopping cart filled with the same brands of yogurt and granola she'd always bought. We locked eyes across the kale. Michael, she said, forcing a smile. You look good. And I realized with sudden clarity that she'd expected me to be broken, that in her mind I should still be the man drowning in bourbon and self-pity. I am good, I said simply. Her gaze flickered to my left hand. No ring, but the tan line from my weekend fishing trip with Ellen's nephews. So it's serious then. It's easy? The word hung between us. Diane's grip tightened on her cart handle. Well, I'm glad you found what you were looking for. As I walked away, I realized with quiet satisfaction that for the first time, I believed her lie. I used to wonder if karma would ever hit her. Now, I don't wonder about her at all. The invitation to Maggie's wedding arrived on a Tuesday, cream-colored cardstock with elegant navy lettering. Ellen stood at my kitchen counter sipping tea while I ran my thumb over the embossed script. "You're listed with a +1, she observed, her voice carefully neutral. I looked up to find her studying me, steam from her mug fogging her glasses. "Would you like to be my date?" The way her face softened told me everything. "I'd love to." We slow danced under twinkling lights to an old Sinatra song, Ellen's head resting against my shoulder. Across the room, Maggie beamed at us while her new husband whispered something in her ear. Later, as we cut into the cake, Ellen nudged me. "Don't look now, but your 2 o'clock just got interesting." Diane stood near the bar in a too bright red dress, clutching a champagne flute, alone. Mark was conspicuously absent. Maggie invited her? Ellen licked frosting off her fork. "Your daughter's a better person than I am." When Diane approached during the bouquet toss, her perfume, the same Chanel No. 5 she'd always worn, hit me first. "She's lovely," Diane said, nodding toward Ellen, who was laughing with my sister by the photo booth. "Very grounded." I sipped my whiskey, letting the silence stretch. "Mark and I split up," she blurted. "Turns out he had a habit of, well," her laugh was brittle. "Funny how that works." I studied the woman who'd once convinced me love had expiration dates. The lines around her mouth were deeper now, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. There was no satisfaction in seeing her pain, just a quiet recognition that we'd both been prisoners of her choices. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Ellen appeared then, slipping her hand into mine. "They're about to do the father-daughter dance," she murmured. As we walked away, Diane called after me, "You really are happy, aren't you?" I didn't turn around. Later, driving home with Ellen asleep in the passenger seat, her curls mussed from dancing, I thought about how happiness isn't a destination, but a series of small choices. Waking up to coffee that tastes right, laughing at inside jokes, learning to trust someone's hands when they reach for you in the dark. Ellen stirred as I pulled into the driveway. You're smiling." "Just thinking," I said, turning off the engine, "how the truth feels lighter than lies ever did." The porch light caught the silver in our hair as we walked inside, two shadows merging into one against the taupe-colored walls.